All right. Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast for the vikingage.com. And for those welcome to the brand new YouTube page for the Viking Age. I'm Adam Patrick. I'm the editor and lead writer for the Viking Age, and I am joined by my co-host, Chris Schad, who writes for us here at the Viking Age. Before we get started today, make sure to follow the Viking Age on Twitter and Facebook. The site's username on Twitter is at the Viking Age, and you can follow the site's Facebook page by heading to facebook.com/the Viking Age. And of course, for those watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video and then hit the subscribe button down below. All right, Chris, let's just get right into today's first topic, which is the Carolina Panthers reportedly called the Vikings about a possible trade involving quarterback Kirk Cousins. Now, this comes from Score North's Judd Zolgad, who also spent a handful of years covering the Vikings for the Star Tribune. So he's got some connections to the team and people outside of the team. He shared on Monday's episode of the Purple Daily podcast that the Carolina Panthers recently called the Vikings about the possibility of a trade for Kirk Cousins. Zolgad also added that the call, quote, went nowhere for now, but that the Vikings and Panthers could potentially maybe reconnect in the future about a possible Kirk Cousins trade. All right, so Chris, are the Panthers a realistic trade partner for the Vikings in terms of moving Kirk Cousins this offseason?
Absolutely. I think they are because I think I saw it on Twitter today that the Panthers are the thirstiest team for a quarterback this offseason. And I mean, Kirk Cousins is a thirst trap. If you want to save your job, win 8 or 9 games like Matt Rule does, Kirk Cousins is the perfect quarterback. And not only that, the Panthers do have some pieces they could send in return. I know not a lot of Viking fans are going to be excited about Sam Darnold as their next quarterback, but it's $18 million. It's a 1-year contract. You can get out of him in 2023, and you can draft your quarterback of the future in this draft or in the 2023 draft. So if you go ahead and do that, maybe you ask for, I don't know, a wide receiver like Justin Jefferson's teammate, Terrace Marshall. Again, that was something I saw on Twitter. I am so sorry. I can't remember the handle right now, but I saw that deal where it was, you have you have Terrace Marshall, you have a round 2 pick, and you have Sam Darnold coming to Minnesota. I think that would be a good haul considering all the pieces that the Vikings need. And I think that you need to take advantage of teams that are going to be desperate. And I think the Carolina Panthers are one of the most desperate teams in this quarterback market.
Yeah, I think the Panthers are very realistic. Uh, who is that?
I don't
I
know
think
what
that
that was. We're live, baby.
I think the Panthers are very realistic as a trade partner for the Vikings when it comes to Kirk Cousins because we've already seen the Panthers. They signed Teddy Bridgewater, they traded for Sam Darnold, and this is year 3 for Matt Rule. He's only been able to win 5 games every year, and he's pretty much looking to do anything possible to save his job, even if it means only getting 9 or 8 wins. I'd be curious to what the Panthers would be willing to give up because they do have a top 10 pick in this year's draft. But that brings me to my next question, which is, if the Panthers weren't willing to give the Vikings a first round pick in this year's draft, would you be okay with them giving the Vikings a first round pick in next year's draft?
I'd almost prefer it. I'd almost prefer it. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm slipping over my words here. I'm so excited that I am slipping over my words because this 2023 class, you're going to have better quarterbacks at your disposal. Bryce Young is regarded as a better prospect. You have CJ Stroud, and usually you have a pop-up prospect that comes out of nowhere. I mean, with this quarterback class, because I assume if you do trade Kirk Cousins, whatever you're doing, you're taking a quarterback, right? So in this quarterback class, you have to be 100% sure that this is your guy. And I look at all these quarterbacks and say, well, if you squint really hard, he could be a franchise guy. That doesn't mean you completely fade the class, but I think it means that you think long and hard about it. So if you get a first round pick in the 2023 class, in a class that's going to have more franchise changing talent, I say go ahead and do it still, especially if you can get something attached to it that could help you down the road.
Would you be okay with the trade if the Panthers were like, "Hey, we'll take Kirk Cousins. You won't have to pay any of his cap or whatever, uh, but you gotta take Sam Darnold." Would you'll be okay with
Are we
that?
talking straight up?
Oh, no, I think
So
not
there
the
would be
Cardinals, but
draft
the
pick.
yeah, it'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
let's lay it out. It would be Kirk Cousins for Sam, well, and the Vikings would maybe throw in what, like a 4th or a 5th, and then go to Carolina for Sam Darnold and, a 1st, or let's say a 3rd this year and a 1st next year.
Yeah, I do that. I mean, honestly, if you can get a first at all for Kirk Cousins, I say do it. I know his stats and I know what Kevin O'Connell said and all that from Thursday, but I mean, look at his contract demands. He wants a $40 million contract, according to a report. And I mean, if you do that, you're in the same spot you're in right now in a couple of years. I know the cap's going to go up, but I mean, this is Kirk Cousins. He's not going to change. I'm a Twins fan. And for the longest time, the Twins had Kyle Gibson. And everybody's like, look at Gibby out there. Gibby's going to battle. And yeah, I know he's only throwing 4 1/3 innings, but I mean, he's battling out there. That's Kirk Cousins. He's the same guy. And Kyle Gibson turned into an all-star with the Phillies, and that's great for him. But I mean, it was never going to happen with the Twins. The same thing goes with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is going to magically morph into a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Vikings. At some point, you have to cut your losses and realize what you're doing is not working. They did it with Rick Spielman. They did it with Mike Zimmer. Now it's time to do it with Kirk Cousins. And I think, we're talking specifically about the Panthers. We said it in the last episode. There are so many teams that are going to be thirsting for a quarterback, and Kirk Cousins is the NFL's thirst trap right now. You got to dangle him. You got to see what you can get, and hopefully something good happens and you get a good deal where you can move on from this and create some cap flexibility.
Yeah, I like the Panthers a lot, as a destination because I think they're probably one of the more likely destinations for Kirk Cousins because, let's face it, the Panthers aren't gonna be in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. He's not gonna be picking the Panthers as one of the teams he would be okay going to if he wants to be traded, and then, maybe same thing goes for Russell Wilson or even Deshaun Watson, which I think Deshaun Watson's probably going to the Steelers now after they just hired Brian Flores, but
Mhm.
that's, and if Deshaun Watson plays, I guess we should,
Yeah.
clarify that. But, I just think the Panthers are very, a team to keep an eye on when it comes to Kirk Cousins. I think maybe the Browns are too, and maybe even the Colts, but I think the Panthers are a very realistic destination. And what does this say, about maybe the outside feelings about how people think the Vikings feel about Kirk Cousins, given that the Panthers, reportedly made this call? Are people like, well, we've heard some chatter that maybe the Vikings would like to move on from Kirk Cousins. Do you think that could be going on here?
I know there's been a lot of reports from Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissero, and Ian Rappaport. I mean, Rappaport's been saying daily, the Vikings are keeping Kirk Cousins. What do they say at the end of every report, though? They need to work out the contract. If they go to Kirk Cousins, he's like, I want $40 million. They have to go, okay, we got to do this. They have to do their homework on this because if they just forge ahead, just paying Kirk Cousins $40 million, it's not going to be to the benefit of this franchise. So they need to talk, they need to do their homework. And I think teams know this. They see the Vikings cap situation and they say, maybe we could get him. Everybody kind of knows who Kirk Cousins is at this point. So I think that the Vikings would be wise to try and go ahead and try to shop Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and it's gonna probably happen soon. I think the combine starts beginning of March, and that's gonna be full of executives and head coaches and agents. So that's a place where a lot of deals go down. So I would expect some things to take place within, or at least get started within that time period, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which has to do with the Vikings adding some more assistant coaches today. There was a report that they were hiring Wes Phillips from the Rams, the tight ends coach for the Rams, as their new OC. That's been officially announced within the last, I believe, half hour. They actually announced 5 additional head coaches to the Vikings staff. They are Wes Phillips, who will be the Vikings offensive coordinator. Matt Daniels will be the special teams coordinator. Durante Jones will be the defensive backs coach. Ben Kotwika or Kotwika, assistant special teams. Sorry if I'm butchering that name because I probably am. And then Mike Smith is the outside linebackers slash pass rush specialist coach. That's kind of interesting. I don't think the Vikings have ever had a pass rushing specialist coach, but they added 5 coaches today, including Wes Phillips, who comes over from the Rams, and we're going to talk about him. He has spent the last 3 years with the Rams. He was the tight ends coach and the passing game coordinator, I believe. And then before that, he was with the Washington Commanders from 2014 to 2018. And then before that, he was on the Dallas Cowboys offensive staff from 2007 to 2013. If his last name sounds familiar, it's because he is the son of former NFL head coach Wade Phillips and the grandson of former NFL head coach Bum Phillips. All right, Chris, what are your thoughts on this hire, if any, about Wes Phillips becoming the new offensive coordinator of the Vikings?
It was going to be weird no matter what, because we know Kevin O'Connell's calling the plays. But from what we've heard, O'Connell wants to establish the same type of relationship that he had with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. So the guy working under him's going to do a lot of the scheming, a lot of the game planning, and kind of the development of the offense. I don't know much about Wes Phillips. I know he was a tight ends coach. He was a passing game coordinator, but I know Kevin O'Connell wants to work through the pass where Mike Zimmer kind of worked through the run. He established the run by running the ball, right? O'Connell wants to do a different thing. He wants to pass, then he wants to run. I will like it depending on what I see in camp. Like, I think this offense is going to look so much more different. I think more people are going to see the Vikings throw the ball, use 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, spread it out. I'm excited to see what Irv Smith Jr. can do in this offense. Like, when you look at this offense on paper, they have the talent that the Rams kind of have. And I know that's kind of a blasphemous statement because they're in the middle of the league in offense, but you have Justin Jefferson, you have Adam Thielen, you have Dalvin Cook in the backfield, you have Irv Smith Jr. returning from that knee injury, and then you have KJ Osborne, Amir Smith Marset could break out, and hey, they could draft another receiver in the first round. Could you imagine Drake London in this offense? That would be a hell of a lot of fun. I think this offense is poised to explode, and it's going to be one of those opportunities that if Kevin O'Connell is successful, people will be falling over themselves to get this job in the future. So I don't really have an opinion on Wes Phillips in general, but the job as a whole, I think it's a good gig to have.
Yeah, I like you, don't really know a whole lot about Wes Phillips. And he's not going to be calling the plays, but I kind of
He
look at it.
is. Oh,
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
I just want to point out he is one of 2 third-generation family coaching trees in the NFL. You want to guess the other one?
I don't, but
Shula.
uh, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
wait,
I
you
don't
have
know their name. Don, Mike, and then I guess there's a
Chris?
third one.
I
I
think
can't
Chris.
think of it.
I think
Could
Chris
be.
Shula
Yes.
is the other one.
Yeah. So there you go.
I
The more you know.
I thought you were going down. For some reason, I thought maybe Gary Kubiak had a dad or something that was in there, or another Shanahan, because
Mhm.
can't get rid of them. Um, yeah, I don't. I look at it though as like kind of when the Vikings hired Mike Zimmer and they brought in George Edwards to be their defensive coordinator, and people are like, what's the point of bringing him in? He's not calling plays or anything, but you know, they need someone because O'Connell has to look over the entire team, and Wes Phillips will be able to help with game planning and maybe even do some scripted plays because I know O'Connell was, I believe he was in charge of that with the Rams, so maybe that'll become Wes Phillips' job with the Vikings. Um, and then, he's just got experience working with O'Connell because he's from the Rams, and then they spent a little bit of time together when they were with the Commanders. Um, so I don't have a problem with the hire. I don't really have I'm not excited or disappointed with it just because I just don't know how to feel. I would be more excited. I think I feel differently about like the defensive coordinator because I know they're probably going to have a bigger impact on that unit than maybe Wes Phillips will, but maybe he won't. Maybe Wes Phillips will help out. But the fact that he's a tight ends coming from a tight ends background does make me feel good about Irv Smith coming back and the things he might be able to do with him. Do you think that with O'Connell there and Phillips there now, and I believe some other people from the Rams as well, will the Vikings, next year or maybe even the year after or whatever, will they be able to replicate some of the Rams' offensive success that they've been able to experience in the last few seasons?
I can think of one area when it comes to getting the ball to Justin Jefferson. That's a lot like Cooper Kupp in the
Mhm.
Super Bowl. Remember, all systems were down for the Rams. And what did Matthew Stafford do? He pumped Justin Jefferson with targets. Now it
You mean
depends on
Cooper
the
Cup?
quarterback because Matthew Stafford is willing to just chuck it anywhere. Remember
For
him and
sure.
Calvin
Yeah.
Johnson? He was the original, bleep it. Calvin Johnson's down there somewhere, or Megatron's down there somewhere, whatever it was. Like we've been begging Kirk Cousins to be like, bleep it, Justin Jefferson's down there somewhere. You
That's a
know,
bad play. That's a bad play.
yeah.
Don't do that.
Oh, I don't care. If you're throwing an interception 40 yards downfield, it's like a punt. But
Mhm.
those stats got to get that $40 million a year he thinks he's getting, right? So, I mean, you have the zone scheme. You already have that in place. That's where Dalvin Cook thrives, or whoever they decide to take in the draft, because I think somebody is coming. You have Justin Jefferson as that wide receiver one. You have Adam Thielen as the wide receiver two, kind of in the Robert Woods mold. And I think they're taking another receiver too. I know KJ Osborne was great, but I think they're going to add pieces to this. This is going to be really exciting for the offense. And I mean, even if Kirk Cousins isn't here, because as much as we rag on him, he puts up great stats. I mean, he gets the ball to Justin Jefferson, he gets the ball to his weapons. He just doesn't do it in the same facet that we would like. So I I think they could come close to replicating what the Rams did, but I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is the new look Rams. They're sure as hell trying with all the assistant coaches, but uh, it it looks very promising.
Yeah, I think you can look at what the Bengals, and they took Taylor from the Rams, and
Mhm.
obviously they got the number one pick, and they got Joe Burrow, and then they got Jamar Chase. But their offense, and they had Joe Mixon, so they have just some similar skill players that the Vikings currently have. I think people in the long run would probably take Joe Burrow over Kirk Cousins, but I think right now skill set they're fairly similar. Maybe not in late game situations or tougher competition. But you look at someone like Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook; those are two similar players. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson obviously are friends and similar players. Both went to LSU. Both very good receivers. So think you look at a team like that and how their offense was able to progress. I think within 3 years, I think that's a fair timetable to expect the offense to kind of get into a groove. Maybe by year two, my expectations for the Vikings in the first year of Kevin O'Connell are going to be pretty low. Um, but I'm also optimistic. He could be. You look at a guy like Matt Lafleur, who also came from Sean McVay's coaching tree. You look at a guy like him and getting the Packers like turning them into an NFC juggernaut, going winning 13 games every year, and maybe Kevin O'Connell can do that. But yeah, it all depends who the quarterback is for the Vikings next season. And at this point, February 21st, We don't know as much as Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero and whoever else from NFL media who have been accused recently of carrying water for the Vikings. Um, as much as they, seem to pump up that Kirk Cousins is going to be the starter for the Vikings next season, that still has to be taken with a grain of salt. Given, I just think, given the history that the Vikings have, it doesn't matter if Spielman or Zimmer are there. We don't know this new regime either. We don't know what they're capable of if they're coming in. If they're going to cut everybody, we don't even know that. So I'm 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 optimistic about the Vikings next year. What do you think?
Bullish. I mean, I think their ceiling's still a 9 or 8 or 9 win team. I'm not
Mhm.
going to put them as legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And to
No, no, no,
me,
no,
2022 doesn't matter. Like I'll
no.
get happy or I'll get sad if the Vikings were to lose, but I think that the grand scheme of things, you're establishing a culture where year 2 or year 3 is going to be the year where it takes off. I don't think the Vikings are going to bottom out and go 3-14 or whatever, but I don't think they're going to go 13-4 either and contend for a Super Bowl title. That's just not what this team is doing. And you have a lot of needs. You need, like I said, you probably need another receiver, right? You definitely need a guard. You need a center. You need defensive linemen, both edge and in the middle. You might need linebackers if Anthony Barr leaves, and you also need help in the secondary. There's a lot of needs between now and turning this team into a contender. And what I don't want to see them do is the same thing they did last year, where they just signed everybody to a bunch of one-year deals, and now we're sitting there going, we don't really have anybody to start. So I think they'll be a middle of the pack team, but it's going to feel different. It's going to feel like there's progress. And I think we can get behind that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be behind with pretty much whatever they do because I feel like it's a new just a new mentality for this franchise.
Matthew Coller mentioned it on his podcast, I think on Friday, that it's a lot like the weather in Minnesota. I know you're in California, so like this, you probably have no idea what this is
Oh,
like.
I
But I
heard what
mean,
he said. Yep, I heard what he
yeah,
said.
when it turns 50 degrees in the
Mhm,
fall, you're kind of like,
mhm,
but when it's 50 degrees in the spring, you're breaking out the
mhm.
shorts, you're grilling some burgers, you're
Hey, I'm from
cracking a
I'm from upstate New
beer.
York. I know how that goes. It
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
40 degrees in February. You're like, "Ooh, it's time to break out the shorts."
See, I
So,
feel like their winters are worse than Minnesota winters, though, because
upstate New York?
you constantly have like 24-inch snowstorms, and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
like 4 to 6, but everybody thinks like Minnesota's like Siberia or something. But
Upstate New York gets cold too. Like Minnesota gets, I
yeah,
think,
oh
like
yeah,
the reputation of being like bitter cold. But you go to Buffalo or Syracuse or whatever, it can get below 0 plus, the lake effect snow, which is
yeah.
ridiculous.
That lake, what is it? Lake Ontario? Is that my
Ontario, there's
geography?
Lake Erie. There's a bunch
Oh
of like
yeah,
you
yeah.
got the Finger Lakes
Okay.
in the middle. There, yeah, it's just everywhere. Lots of snow, which is why I live in San Diego now because I am over snow and ice. Now, cold to me is it's like today. It's a brisk 60 degrees outside. Um,
Oh, nice.
we had to put sweatshirts on to go outside today, so it was a little chilly. We made it through though. But
I feel like
yeah,
if you're up north, you appreciate it more though. Like 60 degrees, you're like, ooh, got to get the sweatshirts out. And I mean, we do here in Minnesota, it's just sweatshirts and shorts. Like you're probably walking around, people are like bundled up like a blizzard's about to hit. Like, I don't know,
yeah,
man. I got to get my North Face jacket on.
yeah.
But
It was 90 here a week ago. So yeah,
I take that.
yeah. We had the AC on in February. I was like, "What is going on?" But yeah, it's, good times out here. Cold in Minnesota, which is why I will probably never go there in the wintertime because I don't go to see my family in the wintertime because it's too cold, so, maybe I will see the Vikings. We'll see. Alright, let's move on to our next topic, which is a game that Chris wanted to play called Bluff or Tell. So, Chris, can you just maybe this was your idea, so I want maybe you to tell people, what we're about to do.
So when I looked at the press conference, it felt a lot like a poker game. When you play Texas Hold'em or whatever, you get your two cards, you're trying to bluff, you're trying to do whatever. And when I heard Kevin O'Connell talk, I'm like, is he bluffing? Is he telling? Is he whatever? So what I did was I put together a couple of quotes. And what I want you to do is tell me whether Kevin O'Connell is bluffing or he's telling the truth. Does that make sense?
Sure. If you want me to do it, or you want me to ask you, or do you want to? We can
I'll
just
ask you
both answer, I
first
guess.
because
Okay.
this is my game and we can go back and forth here.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
Okay.
I'm taking possession of the podcast right now.
Okay.
We're
All right.
partners,
Fine.
remember?
This is the
On air
24/7.
production moving.
This is
Yes,
the 24/7 title, exchanging hands mid show.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. So the first quote I have is Kevin O'Connell talking about Kirk Cousins, and here's what he said. I think Kirk has played at a very high level and he's done a lot of really good things throughout his career. I know who he is as a player. I know what he's capable of. And part of our job as coaches is maximizing a player's ability to go out every single Sunday and have success. I feel that's going to be an advantage for us. And we need to build our system offensively, make sure we really focus on the things Kirk does well, which I do think are a lot of the aspects of playing the position, and help him on a daily basis connect with his team, lead us, be a completely quieted minded quarterback, and then go play because he's talented enough to do that, putting him in the best possible situation to have success. He goes on to say, I know he's already under contract and I'm excited to coach him. I'm going to leave the rest of the quote because it's getting pretty long. But what do you think? Is Kevin O'Connell bluffing or is he telling here?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think he's telling that he is excited to coach him. He is familiar with him in the past, and he knows what he is capable of. Um, I do think he's bluffing a little bit when he says things like, "I anticipate him being our
Mhm.
quarterback," and he's under contract, which if
He's
you
not lying.
if you
Yeah.
had someone, if you had like you asked your boss, or someone asked your boss about, you know, your current status in your job, and they responded, "Well, he's under contract." Um, I don't think that would make you feel too good about your job status with your company. But I think there were some telling things as far as Kevin O'Connell saying, like, to quiet his mind and things like that, and leadership and things like that, which have all been kind of we've talked about. Lots of us have talked about those things in the past when it comes to Kirk Cousins, as far as he has the talent to put up great numbers, but when it comes to leading an entire locker room, or getting the most out of his guys when times are tough, when he's going up against top position, he kind of comes up short a lot. um so I think it's a little mixture of both when it comes to Kirk Cousins. um so that's my final answer.
I think that it's both. I
Yeah.
think it's a bluff and a tell, like you said, because I think the Vikings are playing this situation perfectly. Like Kevin O'Connell was never going to go up in front of the press conference and be like, dude, he sucks. Get him out of
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
He was going to say good things about Kirk Cousins no matter what. And he knew that question was coming. I think what the Vikings are trying to do is they're trying to keep their options open. And what this does is it puts the pressure on Kirk Cousins. Because, like they said, I mean, Quasey, I didn't put this quote in there, but he said, hey, we're building a culture, we're building a foundation where Kirk Cousins can succeed. And if that culture is in place, they can go to the bargaining table and be like, all right, I know this isn't $40 million, but it helps the team out. And we have the best situation for you to succeed. It's like Kirk is a free agent again, and they're trying to sell him all over on what this is. And the advantage Kirk has is he can go, no, screw you. I'm going to make $45 million next year. And the Vikings can go, well, we tried, and Kirk will look like the bad guy. This
Mhm.
isn't going to be on the Vikings. They've shifted the decision to Kirk Cousins. So I like what they've done here. And I think that it's a great bluff for the Vikings.
Yeah, I think that what are they gonna say? What are they gonna say? Yeah, like you said. Oh, he's our quarterback right now. I guess, we'll see what we can do. No.
He sucks. Come and get him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They gotta
he's
they
terrible.
have
Which he
to
doesn't
boost his
suck. I want to clarify that
No,
too.
no, no, no.
He's a good quarterback, just not a
They
$40
have
million
to
quarterback.
boost his trade value. That is the goal
Mhm.
for the next few weeks. And if they are unable to deal him, then they will still look good because they've been complimenting him the whole time. And they'll be like, we weren't lying.
No,
So who's
it was
next?
not the oh yeah, Harrison Smith. And I
All right.
have here, I think he's the perfect player for the defensive structure we want to play from the standpoint of the coverage, how we want to make all things look the same. He's got great length, he's got great instincts. He's going to be a problem for people in the middle of the field and around the line of scrimmage. He really always has been, speaking from experience. Bluff or tell on Harrison Smith?
Uh, I'm going to go on a limb here and say this is a bluff because I think this is one guy the Vikings are going to try and move this year. That might shock some people because I think he's someone that they can probably still get a good return package for, and you shop him to a contender like maybe the Chiefs or like the Ravens or somebody or even the Broncos or somebody else who's in contention that looks at someone like Harrison Smith and is like, this guy can take our defense to the next level, take us to a championship level defense. Um, so I think something similar is going on with Harrison Smith as far as trying to boost his trade value. I think they're going to try and move him because you know they they got Cameron Bynum. Say what you will about him, but he looked pretty good last year in replacement of Harrison Smith. And Harrison Smith, he's getting up there. He's still playing at a good level, high level, but we don't know how long that's going to last. He's making a good amount of money. So, and his trade value might not be as high as it is this year. And this is the year. This year is the year to unload, as many of those people as possible, build for 2023, 2024. This is the year. So I think Kevin O'Connell's comments on Harrison Smith are a bluff.
I here's the thing with Smith. I mean, you have to look at this team and figure the Vikings are rebuilding on defense. And that doesn't mean get rid of everybody. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But I think Harrison Smith's one of the few guys on this roster that has trade value. And if you
Yeah.
could turn him into a second or third round pick, that's another player where you can get younger on the defensive side of the ball. The Vikings have had to get younger over the past couple of years, and they haven't done it. They haven't found enough solid talent. And I think the strength of this draft is not game changing franchise players. I think it's solid starters that you can use that you need in a defense. Like you can't have 11 all stars. That's why they have a salary cap. So I think when it comes to Smith, too, I've always got the feeling he's been kind of part of that Zimmer culture where it's been
Mhm.
this like intense thing, like that shot where he screamed at Cam Dantzler, bleeping cover your
Mhm.
guy or whatever it was. Like
Mhm.
that was kind of it. And then you had the picture when they beat Pittsburgh. And yeah, I mean, every fan felt this way, but I mean, you had half the locker room on one side, celebrating, having fun, and whatever. And then on the other side, you had Harrison Smith looking like he needed a drink or something. Like it just seems like he's one of those Zimmer guys that the Vikings need to get rid of it. It doesn't mean he's a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. It's just if you want to move on, you kind of need guys that are going to fit that culture. And at 4 years and $64 million, he's a little too expensive for what he brings at his age. So I'm sure the Vikings would like to keep him, but they're going to try and work out a restructured deal. And if that doesn't work, they're going to hit the trade market.
Yeah, and I think you have to look too to see, most people would be like, "Oh, Harrison Smith can fit in any defense," but you have to look and see if he's going to fit into what the Vikings now want to do on defense, what Ed Donatel wants to do with his, supposed switch to a 3-4, which is likely going to rely on more coverage in the secondary. Harrison Smith is used to just going wherever on the field, being the the jack of all trades or whatever. Um, and Ed Donatel's defense, who knows? He might be. They just might want him to be in a certain area for most of the time to take care of his zone or whatever. And that's, do you want to pay a guy over 10 million to just do that when you can probably just either draft someone or sign, a veteran free agent off the street?
And
Um,
Cameron Bynum looked well too last year.
yeah, yeah. So and he
There's
he
that.
was yeah. There's a lot. So I think So we both agree what that's a bluff?
I think it's a bluff, yes.
Yeah. All right.
I I
All
I
right.
think he's telling the truth about the impact he can have, but I think it's a bluff
Yeah,
overall.
for sure.
Next guys I have on my list, I grouped these two together because it was kind of the same thing. Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. And here's what he said. Those guys have long since been huge issues in this league for people defensively. I think there's ways to use those guys and allow them to play with an attacking mindset while they're still responsible for the things that they're responsible for defensively. And then I think we've got both players internal and on the edges defensively, defensive line wise, that can impact the quarterback. When it all works together, when that cloud coverage can make it cloudy for the quarterback and that rush is one step closer to getting home, and those backers are doing everything they can to force negative runs on early downs and finish plays in the pass game, it can be a beautiful thing. That long winded answer, and there were plenty of them at the press conference, is it a bluff or is it a tell?
Mm, I think we have to go with a mix, and I think it's a bluff for Anthony Barr and a tell for Eric Kendricks. I think the Eric Kendricks is someone I've just heard a lot from people who cover the Vikings and follow the team very closely, like we do, that everyone would be very surprised if Eric Kendricks is moved this offseason. This isn't to say that he won't be, because we just talked about how Harrison Smith could be on the move. This is the year to move everybody, and Eric Kendricks is included in that, but people would still be surprised if he was on the move. And then but the Anthony Barr thing is interesting because he's a free agent this year. And I know he's got some void years or whatever, some dead money where he can come back and resign for cheaper, but does he want to do that? Does he want to take essentially a pay cut to come back to the Vikings, or does he want to go somewhere else? Maybe like the Rams, go to LA, his hometown, go to the Chargers, maybe go there and play at home, be in a defense, get paid. Does he want to stay with the Vikings? I know he likes the Vikings and stuff he's been able to do out here, and guys like that seem to want to stay and stick around. And he already did that. He already went like pretend to go to the Jets, and then was like, no, 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 no. I'm gonna go back to the Vikings because I like the Vikings the best. But um, I think the comments were nice about Kevin O'Connell. Oh, not about Kevin O'Connell, about Anthony Barr. I look at stuff like this. I looked at a lot of things that Kevin O'Connell said was he can say all this stuff about these guys, but ultimately it comes down to the guy who is sitting next to him. He has the final say when it comes down to these things, which is why Kevin O'Connell has ended like all of his answers like, but at the same time, we also have to do what's best for the team and blah 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 because he knows he does not have the final say. He is gonna just take whatever guys Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah gives him, and he's gonna roll with that. So my answer is a bluff for Anthony Barr and a tell for Eric Kendricks.
I think it's a tell for both. I think that
Yep,
Eric Kendricks is staying. He's a sideline to sideline guy. And if you're going to play that 3-4 base, you need a sideline to sideline tackling machine.
and he's a
Here's
great
why I
leader.
think they're, yes, here's why I think they keep Anthony Barr. And like Kendricks, he's a great leader too. But I think with Barr, remember when he came into the draft and he was this 3-4 projected linebacker?
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
reason Mike Zimmer took him was because he wanted a guy that could cover running backs and make plays. And we gave Barr a whole bunch of crap. But what was he asked to do in Mike Zimmer's defense? This could have been another situation where the Vikings were keeping a Ferrari parked in a trailer park. I mean, we saw it
Yeah,
all over on offense, but maybe on defense too, because Anthony Barr could have been that 3-4 stand up pass rusher that could be collecting double digit sacks. I don't think he has that. I think his knee is a little bit flawed, but
yeah.
I think Kevin O'Connell looks at a player like that and goes, hey, he would be great in a 3-4 and we could use him. So I think that the Vikings are going to try to keep Anthony Barr. They just have to find it at the right price.
Yeah, price is very important. I think he probably looks at a lot of these guys too as like, we can't get rid of everybody. We got to keep some leadership on our roster because I think the Vikings in the past might have, bitten themselves a bit by cutting guys who were pretty much huge leaders in their locker room, maybe getting rid of them too fast. You look at guys like maybe a Brian Robinson where, he wasn't playing at a Pro Bowl level or whatever, but he was, very important to the success of the Vikings in 2017. You look at someone like Terrence Newman, kind of similar, and then they let those guys go, I think, before the 2018 season, and there was not they that team lacked leadership, and I feel like if those 2 were maybe on that roster, things might have turned out differently. So I think Kevin O'Connell's looking at the Vikings roster and being like, who are the leaders we can keep? If we're able to get these guys at a good price, let's try and keep them around. So I could see Barr sticking around, but like you said, it has to be the right price. All right. So we got
Last
you
guy.
said tell for both, and then I said
I said tell
bluff,
for both. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
said bluff for Anthony Barr and tell for
Yep.
Eric Kendricks. All right. So last guy who was not mentioned at all.
Well, I won't have to dryly read any quotes about this guy because he didn't get
No.
mentioned in the press conference at all. That's Daniil Hunter. Bluff or tell?
Uh, I think it's a tell. I think it's maybe some of these things. It's like, did he do it on purpose? But like, then you think about like how much money goes into this business and how calculated everything is, and how much time someone like Kevin O'Connell had to prepare for a press conference like this. For him to not mention Daniil Hunter at all is very weird. Um, you know, and I think maybe that's a tell for what either the Vikings saying, "Hey, if you want to come back, then you gotta do it on our terms and take less money because you've played 7 games in the last 2 years. So if you want to come back, you can take less money. If not, you're gone." So I think it was kind of a, you know what, he can be like, he might even be asked. He might have already been asked about this question. Like, why wasn't Daniil Hunter in your press conference? He's probably like, "Oh, I just forgot about him. He's a great player." But I think it was a tell when it comes to Daniil Hunter.
I think it's a strained relationship, like
Mm.
overall, just even with a new general manager and everything else. And again, what are the most tradable assets? I don't think you're getting a first for Daniil Hunter with that injury history, but does he want to play in a 3-4? Does he, there's just a lot of questions when it
Does he want
comes
to
to Daniil
follow
Hunter.
Andre Patterson to the Giants?
Right. Yeah. I think he's another guy you shop, you see what you can do. I mean, everybody kind of knows that, they have the $18 million option. The Vikings could just kind of cut him. They obviously don't want to do that because he's got trade value and they don't want to just cut a guy that could get double-digit sacks. I think it's telling. I think it's a tell because I think the Vikings are prepared to move on. And I think there's a lot of things just pointing towards a split. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Hunter's been a great Viking. The last couple of years just kind of went in the wrong direction. And, sometimes you just need a change. So maybe there's a second act, like you said, with the Giants where Andre Patterson went, where Hunter can kind of get back to being the player he was pre-injuries.
Yeah, I would keep an eye on that for sure. And maybe Daniel Hunter's more open to listening to the Vikings now because Rick Spielman is gone, because Mike
Mhm.
Zimmer is gone, because I don't know if you remember, like, when he was going through all the next stuff, and, you know, people asked Mike Zimmer, "Have you talked to Daniil or whatever? Have you heard from him?" And he's like, "No." And then we're like,
Yeah.
"This guy's, like, your best defensive player, and you haven't talked to him? Like, what are you
Like
doing?"
everybody just assumed that Mike Zimmer had this like tight relationship with all his
Yeah.
defensive players. And like Eric Kendricks came out after the
Oh,
season. He's
right,
just
yeah.
like, no, yeah. It was kind of weird. And there he's like, what? Like, I wouldn't be shocked if like the same thing happened with Hunter. The same thing. I mean, he basically threw Cameron Dantzler in the doghouse and locked away the key. I don't think Cameron Dantzler's that good, to be honest with you. But I mean, like, when Mike Zimmer decides to like evaporate you, it's like Thanos, man. He just snaps his fingers and you disintegrate in the dust because you're dead to him. Like the last
Yeah.
couple of years, I mean, I don't know what Daniil Hunter's supposed to do. Play on a torn pack, like that's just yeah.
It's like when he got
I'm
mad.
just glad that I'm glad that era's over. Like seriously,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if
It was
not, we'd
it
be
was time
talking
for a
about the
change.
same things. So
Yeah, and, I think back to when he was, like, mad at Sharif Floyd for being injured when his surgery was botched.
for when the doctor screwed up.
Yeah,
How
and he's
dare
like,
you?
he's always injured. He never's on the field, and it's like the guy like cut open his ligaments in his leg. All right, that's all we got for today, everybody. Thanks, Chris, for that wonderful game. Make sure to follow the Viking Age on Twitter, Facebook, and please make sure you like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and to hit subscribe down below. But until next time, Chris and I will talk to you later. All right. See you later, everybody.